Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Eastern Tennessee. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you are watching from and the exact time when you are listening to this narration. We are interested in knowing what places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. In the spring of 1984, a real estate assessor named Richard Denton ventured into the remote hills of Morgan County to evaluate what property records listed as an abandoned homestead. The winding dirt road led him deep into a narrow valley locals called Black Snake Hollow, a place so isolated that electricity had only reached it a decade prior. Denton would later describe in his sworn testimony how the forest seemed to close in behind his vehicle, how the light changed quality as he descended deeper into the hollow. The air grew thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. At first, Denton believed the property was indeed abandoned, as the county records indicated. The rutted dirt driveway showed no recent tire tracks, and no smoke rose from the chimney of the distant structure. It wasn't until he had parked and approached the main house that he noticed small signs of habitation. Recently split firewood, a garden patch with young sprouts. Laundry hung on a line behind one of the smaller outbuildings. He knocked at the door, notepad in hand, prepared to explain his presence to whoever might answer. The door opened just enough to reveal a face so distinctive that Denton would have no trouble describing it later to police sketch artists. A man with unusually close-set eyes, pronounced facial asymmetry, and skin marked by a distinctive pattern of lesions, assessed the visitor silently. "Taxman," Denton explained, holding up his county identification. "We've been expecting you," the man said in a thick Appalachian accent. What Denton discovered beyond that threshold would trigger one of the most disturbing criminal investigations in Tennessee history. County records recovered during the investigation revealed that the Monroe homestead occupied approximately 120 acres of densely wooded hillside, accessible only by a single dirt road that became impassable during heavy rains. The property had been in the Monroe family since 1897, when Ezekiel Monroe, a coal miner from Virginia, purchased the land for a surprisingly substantial sum of $1,200 in gold coins. The transaction, documented in the Morgan County Land Registry, raised no suspicions at the time, though later investigation would question how a simple coal miner had acquired such wealth. The main house, a sprawling two-story structure built in the 1922 according to tax records, stood surrounded by 6 smaller cabins arranged in a rough semicircle facing inward toward a central clearing. This unusual configuration, as Denton noted in his assessment report, resembled more of a small village than a typical Appalachian family homestead. A large barn constructed of hand-hewn oak timbers dominated the western edge of the clearing, while several smaller outbuildings and root cellars dotted the property. Behind the main house, partially obscured by a stand of ancient oak trees, lay a small family cemetery enclosed by a rusted iron fence. Denton's initial observations, recorded meticulously in his county-issued notebook, noted both the unusual layout of the settlement and the striking physical similarities among the individuals he encountered during his assessment. "All residents display similar facial structure and mannerisms," he wrote. "Unusually close, set eyes, pronounced overbite, distinctive pattern of movement." Most troubling to Denton was the way the family members seemed to communicate without speaking, exchanging glances that appeared to convey complex messages. As he moved through the property, measuring structures and noting their condition, he became increasingly aware of being watched from windows and doorways. Children with the same distinctive features as the adults peered at him from behind curtains, vanishing when he turned to look directly at them. According to Denton's report filed with the Morgan County Assessor's Office, recovered during a records digitization project in 2012, his initial meeting with the Monroe family revealed troubling inconsistencies that would later prove significant to investigators. Absalom Monroe, the 68-year-old patriarch, greeted Denton with unexpected hostility when he attempted to explain the purpose of his visit. "No pictures," Absalom had insisted when Denton produced his camera, a standard tool for tax assessment documentation. "No government pictures on Monroe land." Despite Denton's explanation that photographs were required for the assessment, Absalom remained firm. his weathered hand resting uncomfortably close to the hunting knife sheathed at his belt. During the tense hour that followed, Denton observed approximately 15 individuals of varying ages moving about the property, all displaying the same distinctive physical characteristics. Unusually close-set eyes, pronounced overbites, and malformed fingers with abnormal joints. The women, dressed in homemade garments of similar drab fabric, avoided direct interaction with the assessor, while male family members watched his every movement with unwavering attention. Most disturbing was Denton's observation of several children who appeared to be kept separate from others, confined to one of the outlying cabins at the far edge of the clearing. These children, visible only through a grimy window, appeared more severely affected by whatever condition plagued the family, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. When Denton inquired about them, Absalom's response was curt. "Those ones ain't right for company." The patriarch refused to elaborate further. Throughout the inspection, Denton noted an unsettling synchronicity in the family's movements, as if they operated with a shared consciousness. When one Monroe shifted position, others would adjust accordingly, maintaining precise distances from the visitor at all times. Like watching a single organism, Denton would later tell investigators, not individual people. Sheriff William Tanner of Morgan County was a methodical man who had maintained a carefully organized file of missing persons reports dating back to 1971, the year he first took office. The thick manila folder, stored in a locked cabinet in his office, contained 23 cases of individuals reported missing within a 30-mile radius of Black Snake Hollow over a 13-year period. The disappearances followed no obvious pattern. Hikers exploring the Appalachian foothills, travelers passing through on their way to Knoxville or Chattanooga, and occasionally locals with no known connection to the Monroe family. The cases remained unsolved, with investigations hampered by the rugged terrain, lack of witnesses, and absence of physical evidence. Tanner had periodically reviewed the files, noting similarities and differences, searching for connections that might have eluded initial investigations. The break came unexpectedly when Richard Denton stopped by the sheriff's office 3 days after his assessment visit. While filing his report with Deputy Sarah Collins, Denton mentioned casually that he had observed a strange collection of vehicles partially hidden behind the Monroe barn. "Looked like they were stripping them for parts," he told Collins. "Counted at least 4 different cars and a pickup truck under that tarp." Collins, who had assisted in cataloging the missing persons reports the previous winter, immediately recognized the description of a blue 1978 Ford Bronco with distinctive aftermarket wheels as matching the vehicle driven by Timothy Larson, a geology student from the University of Tennessee, who had disappeared while collecting rock samples in 1981. Further comparison revealed that a red Volkswagen Beetle and a green Chevrolet pickup also matched vehicles listed in missing persons reports from 1979 and 1983. This connection, seemingly mundane in the moment, would provide the crucial link that led Sheriff Tanner to focus his attention on the reclusive Monroe family after years of fruitless investigation. On the 17th of April 1984, Sheriff Tanner assembled a small team to visit the Monroe property under the pretense of conducting a routine property survey related to a proposed county road expansion. The team consisted of Tanner himself, Deputies Sarah Collins and Miguel Martinez, and County Surveyor Harold Jenkins, whose presence lent credibility to their cover story. What began as a cautious inquiry, documented in Tanner's official report, case file hash height 4-137, quickly evolved into something far more disturbing as the officers noted multiple inconsistencies in Absalom Monroe's statements. The patriarch's account of family members present on the property contradicted what Denton had observed just days earlier. When questioned about property boundaries, Absalom gave conflicting information about the location of the western property line, becoming visibly agitated when Deputy Collins suggested they verify the boundary markers. Most concerning were Absalom's vague explanations regarding various possessions visible in the main house, items that appeared too new and expensive for a family with no visible means of income. While Sheriff Tanner engaged Absalom in conversation about the supposed road project, Deputies Collins and Martinez conducted a casual visual inspection of the immediate surroundings. Deputy Collins noted in her supplementary report that an unlocked shed near the main house contained what appeared to be blood-stained tools, hunting knives, saws, and a cleaver, alongside unusually sophisticated butchering equipment. Meanwhile, Martinez, who had asked to use the bathroom inside the main house, noticed a kitchen drawer left partially open. Inside were several driver's licenses hidden beneath kitchen towels. Though he couldn't examine them closely, he recognized the name Timothy Larson on one license, one of the individuals reported missing in 1981. The officers maintained their professional demeanor throughout the visit, careful not to alert the Monroes to their suspicions, but upon returning to their vehicles, Tanner immediately radioed dispatch to begin preparation for a search warrant application. Genealogical records obtained through the Tennessee State Archives revealed the Monroe family's disturbing history, providing investigators with crucial context for understanding the clan's isolation and behavioral patterns. Beginning with Ezekiel Monroe's arrival in Morgan County in the late 1800s, the family had systematically cut itself off from outside contact, rarely registering births or deaths with county authorities, and almost never marrying outside the bloodline. Census records from 1900 indicated that Ezekiel had arrived with 3 sisters, Tabitha, Ruth, and Esther, all of whom were listed as his wives in a handwritten family Bible recovered during the investigation. This document, with its meticulous tracking of births, deaths, and unions, provided evidence of deliberate inbreeding from the clan's earliest days in Tennessee. County health records from the 1950 seconds discovered in a storage facility during the investigation contained a single notation from a visiting public health nurse who had attempted a wellness check at the property during a polio vaccination campaign. Though turned away at gunpoint, the nurse noted concerns about apparent congenital deformities consistent with consanguineous reproduction observed in children visible from the property entrance. She recommended further investigation, but no follow-up was documented. By systematically cross-referencing partial birth records, death certificates, school enrollment information, or conspicuous absences thereof, and the family Bible, investigators determined that by 1984, the Monroe clan consisted of 31 individuals spanning 4 generations, all descended from Ezekiel and his sisters. Dr. Eleanor Mitchell, the genetic specialist consulted by the prosecution, would later testify that the family tree revealed one of the most extreme cases of sustained inbreeding documented in modern American history, with genetic diversity comparable to what might be seen after 9 or 10 generations of first-cousin marriages. The discovery of the driver's licenses provided Sheriff Tanner with sufficient probable cause to obtain a search warrant for the Monroe property. On the 30th of April 1984, he presented his evidence to Judge Harrison Mills in a closed-door hearing at the Morgan County Courthouse. The application for warrant, document number 84W329, detailed the suspicious circumstances observed during both Denton's assessment visit and the subsequent law enforcement inspection. Judge Mills, a cautious man with 30 years on the bench, questioned Tanner extensively about the reliability of Deputy Martinez's identification of the licenses and the connection to missing persons cases. After reviewing photographs of the vehicles partially visible on Monroe property and comparing them to missing persons reports, Mills was convinced. He authorized a complete search of all structures and grounds but added a handwritten note of caution that would prove prescient. Something about this situation feels powder keg dangerous. Extreme caution advised when executing this warrant. The document was immediately sealed from public record to prevent any potential leaks that might alert the subjects. In the 3 days that followed, Sheriff Tanner methodically assembled his team and planned the operation with military precision. He selected 12 deputies, including a tactical unit borrowed from Knox County Sheriff's Department with experience in rural operations. The team conducted 2 reconnaissance exercises using a topographical model of the property created based on survey records and aerial photographs. They established approach routes, contingency plans, and emergency extraction procedures. Medical personnel were placed on standby at Morgan County Hospital. The search was scheduled for May 3, 1984, with officers to arrive at the property at 4:30 a.m. the early morning hours when most of the family would likely be asleep, minimizing the potential for resistance or destruction of evidence. The search of the Monroe property began precisely at 4:30 a.m. on the 3rd of May 1984, under heavy cloud cover that shrouded the approach of law enforcement vehicles. Officers secured the perimeter within minutes, encountering no immediate resistance as they surrounded the main house and outbuildings. What started as a methodical investigation, following standard evidence collection protocols, quickly descended into chaos when Deputy Rodriguez, searching the kitchen area, discovered a trapdoor concealed beneath a braided rug. The root cellar beneath contained the first set of human remains, a discovery that fundamentally altered the nature of the investigation. According to the official report, partially redacted until 2009 for what authorities described as public welfare concerns, officers found evidence of at least 7 victims in various stages of decomposition. Some appeared to have been processed as if for consumption, with body parts carefully preserved in salt or stored in jars of cloudy liquid. More disturbing were the discoveries in the barn, where a false wall concealed a chamber that County Medical Examiner Patricia Wallace would later describe as a processing facility. The space contained specialized butchering equipment, industrial freezers powered by a generator and containing neatly packaged human remains, and perhaps most disturbingly, tanned human skin fashioned into utilitarian items, lampshades, book covers, and clothing accessories. By mid-morning, as the scope of the horror became clear, Sheriff Tanner established a secure communication line to request assistance from both the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation and the FBI. The family members, found sleeping in their respective cabins during the initial entry, offered no resistance during arrest. Most disturbing to arresting officers was their apparent lack of surprise or concern, as if the discovery of their activities was an expected and unremarkable event. The most horrifying discoveries occurred in the network of limestone caves beneath the property, accessible through a concealed entrance in the floor of the barn. This entrance, hidden beneath straw bales and a false section of flooring, led to a crude stairway cut directly into the limestone bedrock. FBI agent Catherine Reeves, a veteran investigator specializing in ritualistic crimes, led the underground exploration team equipped with respirators and specialized lighting. Her 47-page report, portions of which remain classified to this day, documented 3 distinct chambers interconnected by narrow passages. The first chamber, approximately 20 feet below ground level, contained what appeared to be living quarters, roughly constructed beds, chairs fashioned from wood and bone, and crude amenities including a water collection system from natural seepage. Personal items found in this space suggested regular occupation by multiple family members. The second chamber, larger and deeper in the network, served as additional storage for human remains and personal effects of victims. Here, investigators documented clothing, jewelry, identification documents, and other belongings methodically organized on shelves carved into the rock walls. Most disturbing was the discovery of a leather-bound journal containing entries dating back to 1923, detailing harvests with precise dates, descriptions, and quality assessments. The third chamber, deepest in the network and reached only through a narrow passage requiring investigators to crawl single file for nearly 40 feet, contained evidence of ritualistic activities that extended far beyond the initial suspicions of murder and cannibalism. Stone altars stained with what forensic analysis would confirm was human blood. Unusual symbols carved into the walls that matched no known religious or occult traditions, and what appeared to be ceremonial implements, fashioned from human bone painted with intricate patterns, suggested practices that Agent Reeves described as evidence of an entirely self-contained belief system developed over multiple generations in isolation. The Monroe family offered no resistance during the initial search and arrests, a behavior that investigators initially attributed to the element of surprise, but later came to view as deeply unsettling. According to the official arrest record, 17 adults, ranging in age from 19 to 68 years, were taken into custody, while 14 children were placed in emergency protective services through the Tennessee Department of Children's Services. Each family member was photographed, fingerprinted, and subjected to preliminary medical examination before transport to holding facilities. Throughout this process, the arrested individuals displayed an eerie calm that numerous officers noted in their reports. They showed neither surprise nor distress as they were led away from the property in handcuffs, maintaining blank expressions and making minimal eye contact with law enforcement personnel. Most disturbing to the arresting officers was the lack of emotional response from any family member, even as children were separated from parents and siblings. The children, like their adult counterparts, remained silent and cooperative, displaying none of the expected trauma reactions. Deputy Collins documented in her report that when 5-year-old Ruth Monroe was led to a separate vehicle from her mother, neither individual acknowledged the separation with so much as a glance. Special Agent Reeves noted in her preliminary report that the Monroe clan members appear to operate with a collective mindset unlike anything I've encountered in 20 years of law enforcement. Their compliance feels strategic rather than submissive. This observation would prove prescient as the investigation continued. The adults were transported to 3 separate facilities to prevent communication: Morgan County Jail, Knox County Detention Center, and a temporary holding facility established at a National Guard armory. Despite this precaution, staff at all 3 locations reported that the Monroe family members exhibited identical behaviors at identical times, suggesting a level of coordination that defied conventional explanation. Initial interrogation of the Monroe family members yielded almost nothing of value, despite the involvement of experienced FBI interrogators and local officers familiar with regional dialect and customs. Each adult, when questioned separately in different facilities, recited nearly identical statements about family history, daily activities, and professed complete ignorance of any criminal behavior. Transcripts of these interviews reveal responses so uniform that investigators initially suspected the family had been coached until they confirmed the impossibility of communication between the separated individuals. The statements were delivered with the same flat affect across 17 interviews, with identical phrasing and even identical grammatical errors, suggesting a deeply ingrained family protocol rather than spontaneous responses. Investigators employed various interrogation techniques over 72 hours, including good cop divided by bad cop dynamics, offers of leniency, and confrontation with photographic evidence, all without success. The breakthrough came unexpectedly on the 3rd day when Agent Catherine Reeves, following a hunch, showed Leah Monroe, a 3-year-old woman with less pronounced physical characteristics than other family members, photographs of the children in protective custody. Leah's reaction was subtle but significant, a barely perceptible flinch when shown an image of a young boy with particularly severe facial deformities. When Reeves mentioned that the children were being examined by doctors, Leah broke the family's pattern of silence. "They won't understand what they need," she whispered. This opening led to Leah's testimony, recorded over 19 hours across 2 days, which revealed the inner workings of a family whose isolation had bred a belief system entirely separate from the outside world. The transcripts, running to 342 pages, provided investigators with their first real understanding of the Monroe clan's structure, practices, and the twisted logic that had governed their actions for generations. Leah Monroe's testimony, preserved in FBI records under case file TNMG8407715, provided investigators with the first clear window into the Monroe clan's beliefs and practices. Speaking in a monotone voice that occasionally gave way to whispers when discussing certain rituals, Leah described a family structure governed absolutely by Absalom Monroe through what she called the old ways, a system of rules and rituals supposedly passed down from Ezekiel Monroe since the family's establishment in Tennessee. According to Leah, the Monroe clan believed themselves to be pure vessels, whose blood carried special properties that could not be diluted by outsiders. This belief had been reinforced through generations of carefully managed inbreeding, with Absalom personally determining which family members would produce children together to maintain what he called the sacred lineage. Children were taught from infancy that the outside world was poisoned by modern conveniences and moral corruption, and that only by maintaining bloodline purity could the family continue to receive visions from the other side, communications from ancestral spirits that guided family decisions. Leah explained that these visions, experienced primarily by Absalom and other elders during rituals in the cave system, dictated everything from planting schedules to harvest times. Most disturbing was Leah's matter-of-fact description of how the family would harvest travelers who strayed too close to their property or who made the fatal mistake of accepting offers of shelter. These killings were performed not merely for material gain, though victims' possessions were methodically collected and catalogued, but because the Monroe clan believed that consuming the flesh of outsiders transferred their spiritual strength and worldly knowledge to the family. Grandfather Ezekiel taught that outsider meat carries their learning. Leah stated without emotion, "We take their strength into our blood to keep us strong against the poison world." Dr. Eleanor Mitchell, Chief Medical Examiner for the state of Tennessee, led the specialized team that conducted comprehensive medical examinations of all Monroe family members following their arrest. Her findings, published in a heavily redacted report in 1987 after the conclusion of legal proceedings, documented the severe physical consequences of generations of inbreeding within the isolated community. The examinations revealed a consistent pattern of health abnormalities across all family members. Cardiac abnormalities, including septal defects and valve malformations, severely compromised immune systems resulting in chronic infections, distinctive skeletal malformations, particularly in the cranial structure and extremities, and neurological irregularities affecting coordination and sensory processing. More surprising were the toxicology results, which revealed elevated levels of unusual compounds in the blood of all family members, including the children. Chemical analysis conducted at the FBI laboratory in Quantico identified these compounds as derivatives of ergot alkaloids, psilocybin, and several unidentified substances. Dr. Mitchell's team concluded that these compounds derived from a combination of native plants, fungi harvested from the cave system beneath the property, and most disturbingly, human neural tissue, consumed as part of regular communion rituals described in Leah's testimony. In her confidential briefing to federal prosecutors, Dr. Mitchell hypothesized that chronic exposure to these compounds from early childhood had profound effects on brain chemistry, potentially explaining the family's altered perception of reality, their synchronous behavior patterns, and their apparent shared delusions. Brain imaging conducted on 5 adult family members revealed unusual patterns of neural connectivity and activity, particularly in regions associated with identity formation, boundary recognition between self and others, and reality testing. In essence, Mitchell wrote in her private notes later subpoenaed for trial, "We are witnessing the neurological results of a multi-generational pharmacological experiment conducted within an isolated genetic population." The 14 Monroe children, ranging in age from infancy to 16 years, presented authorities with unprecedented challenges that required the creation of a specialized care protocol. Initial evaluations, conducted at East Tennessee Children's Hospital under the supervision of pediatrician Dr. Sarah Livingston, revealed profound developmental abnormalities. None of the children had received formal education, medical care, or any exposure to the world beyond Black Snake Hollow. Medical examinations documented severe nutritional deficiencies, untreated congenital conditions, and evidence of consumption of the same pharmacologically active substances found in the adults, apparently administered from early infancy. Most disturbing were the behavioral patterns observed among the children during the initial observation period. Staff documented an absence of individual personality development, typically seen even in cases of severe neglect, minimal verbal communication even among those of appropriate age, and ritualistic movements, performed in unison at specific times of day regardless of physical separation between the children. When placed in different rooms without visual contact, the children would nonetheless begin identical rocking motions or chanting at precisely the same moments. Child psychologist Dr. James Thornton, who developed a specialized therapeutic approach for the Monroe children and worked with them for over 3 years, would later publish a landmark paper in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology, describing what he termed collective identity development, in which the children appeared to function as components of a single organism rather than as individuals with separate consciousnesses. Traditional psychological frameworks proved inadequate, Thornton wrote. These children share not only genetic material and environmental conditioning, but appear to share a collective consciousness that transcends individual identity formation, challenging our fundamental understanding of human psychological development. The prosecution of the Monroe case presented unprecedented legal challenges that required careful navigation of both criminal law and emerging understandings of psychology and genetics. District Attorney Margaret Reynolds assembled a special team including 2 seasoned homicide prosecutors, a forensic evidence specialist, and a consultant with expertise in cult psychology to handle what promised to be one of the most complex criminal cases in Tennessee history. The evidence against the Monroe family was overwhelming by any standard. Physical remains of at least 27 identified victims found on the property, DNA evidence linking multiple family members to the crimes, financial records showing the Monroes had been selling possessions of victims through various outlets for decades, and Leah Monroe's extensive testimony providing motive and methodology. Yet the defense strategy, led by court-appointed attorney Thomas Blackwell, a former public defender known for handling difficult cases, introduced novel legal questions by focusing on the family's complete isolation, generations of inbreeding, and the resulting cognitive impairments. Blackwell assembled a team of expert witnesses, including geneticists, neuropsychologists, and anthropologists specializing in isolated communities. As jury selection began in November 1984, with potential jurors being carefully screened for exposure to media coverage and biases, the question at the center of the case became not whether the crimes had occurred. The evidence on that point was incontrovertible, but whether the perpetrators could be held legally responsible given their profound disconnection from societal norms and apparent shared delusions. The case threatened to create a new precedent regarding culpability in instances of extreme cultural isolation and genetic abnormality. Judge William Hargrove, recognizing the landmark nature of the proceedings, allowed cameras in the courtroom for limited portions of the trial, creating a national sensation. Dr. Robert Samuels, director of forensic psychiatry at Vanderbilt University and author of 3 definitive textbooks on criminal psychology, led the team that conducted comprehensive psychiatric evaluations of the 17 adult Monroe family members during their pre-trial detention. His findings, parts of which remain sealed by court order to this day, described what he termed a folie à famille of unprecedented scale, a shared psychosis that had evolved over generations of isolation, inbreeding, and ritual drug use. According to portions of the report released during trial proceedings, the Monroe clan operated under a shared delusional system so complete that they had developed their own language for sacred concepts, a calendar based on lunar cycles rather than standard months, and a moral framework that inverted conventional ethical boundaries. The family members demonstrated consistent responses to specialized psychological assessments, with nearly identical answers to projective tests like the Rorschach and thematic apperception test, a phenomenon Samuels described as statistically impossible without coordinated deception or profound shared psychological reality. Most disturbing was Samuels' conclusion that despite clear evidence of cognitive abnormalities and shared delusions, the family displayed sophisticated adaptive behaviors when necessary, including the ability to interact with outsiders in limited contexts while concealing their true nature and activities. This selective adaptation, appearing sufficiently normal during brief interactions with tax assessors or store clerks while maintaining their isolated belief system, suggested a level of awareness regarding societal norms and expectations that would become crucial to the prosecution's argument regarding legal culpability. They know enough about the outside world to hide from it, Samuels testified. They understand that their practices would be condemned, which indicates an awareness of conventional morality even as they reject it. The trial of Absalom Monroe and 16 adult family members began on the 12th of February 1985 in the Morgan County Courthouse, a building hastily modified to accommodate enhanced security measures and the unprecedented media attention. The proceedings, scheduled initially for 6 weeks, stretched to 11 as the prosecution methodically presented physical evidence, expert testimony, and the disturbing details of the Klan's practices. Despite Judge Hargrove's attempts to keep the most graphic evidence sealed and proceedings private, details leaked to an increasingly horrified public, with newspapers across the country running front-page coverage of what journalists dubbed the Tennessee Horror. The defense strategy of arguing diminished capacity due to generations of isolation and inbreeding ultimately failed to convince the jury, who deliberated for just 9 hours before returning guilty verdicts on multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, and desecration of human remains. At the sentencing hearing on the 7th of May, 1985, Judge William Hargrove delivered a statement that would be quoted in law textbooks for decades to come. While this court acknowledges the unique circumstances of the defendant's upbringing, the systematic nature of these crimes demonstrates an awareness of their wrongfulness. He sentenced Absalom and 6 other family members, deemed ringleaders, to multiple life sentences without possibility of parole. 9 others received varying sentences of 20 to 60 years based on their assessed levels of involvement and culpability. Only Leah Monroe, in exchange for her extensive testimony, received a reduced sentence of 15 years with mandatory psychiatric treatment at a specialized facility. Court reporter Meredith Jenkins documented in her personal journal that as the Monroe family members were led from the courtroom following sentencing, they moved in perfect unison without any apparent signals, their expressions identical and emotionless. A final demonstration of their disturbing collective identity that left even veteran courthouse staff visibly shaken. In the decades following the Monroe case, the property in Black Snake Hollow remained abandoned, the buildings gradually reclaimed by the encroaching forest. Morgan County authorities demolished the main house and barn in 1986 after completion of evidence collection, but left the smaller structures to decay naturally. The land reverted to state ownership due to unpaid taxes, and despite multiple attempts to auction the property, local superstitions and its notorious history deterred potential buyers. Warning signs posted at the entrance to the dirt road were repeatedly stolen by curiosity seekers until officials simply stopped replacing them. The case faded from national attention until 2008, when documentary filmmaker Caroline Weber visited the site while researching Appalachian crime histories for a project on rural isolation and deviance. The resulting documentary, Blood in the Hollow, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and reignited public interest in the case. More significant than the film's commercial success was Weber's discovery during filming: personal journals kept by Ezekiel Monroe, hidden in a wall cavity of one of the remaining cabins, and overlooked during the original investigation. These writings, spanning from 1878 to 1934, suggested that the family's isolation and practices predated their arrival in Tennessee, potentially connecting them to similar cases in Virginia and West Virginia dating back to the mid-1800s. Particularly disturbing were Ezekiel's references to other family branches that had established similar compounds in remote areas throughout Appalachia. The Monroe case continues to influence modern criminology, psychology, and anthropology, a chilling reminder that in the most isolated corners of America, darkness can flourish undetected for generations, creating realities so distant from our own that they challenge our fundamental understanding of human nature and the thin veneer of civilization that separates us from our most primitive instincts.